August 16th, 1956. Southern California, 11:00 a.m. A U.S. Navy F-6F Hellcat target drone was flying over the Pacific Ocean, being used for gunnery practice at Point Mugu Naval Air Station. It was a routine training exercise. Fighter pilots would practice tracking and shooting at the remote-controlled drone. Then something went wrong. The drone's radio control system malfunctioned. The ground controllers lost contact. The drone stopped responding to commands. And instead of circling over the ocean where it was supposed to crash harmlessly when it ran out of fuel, the drone turned east, toward Los Angeles. The drone had a full tank of fuel. It could fly for hours, and it was now heading directly toward one of America's largest cities, completely out of control. The military had to stop it before it crashed into a populated area. They scrambled fighter jets armed with rockets and cannons. Their mission was simple: shoot down one unmanned target drone. They had multiple aircraft, experienced pilots, hundreds of rockets, thousands of rounds of ammunition. For the next 90 minutes, they would chase that drone across Southern California, firing everything they had at it. They would miss every single shot. The drone would fly unscathed over Palmdale, over the San Fernando Valley, over populated areas, while fighter jets blasted away at it from every angle. Spent rockets would rain down on civilian neighborhoods. Buildings would be damaged, cars destroyed, people injured. And the drone? It would eventually run out of fuel and crash on its own. The Air Force never hit it. This is the story of the Battle of Palmdale, the day the U.S. Air Force went to war with a robot and lost. One of the most embarrassing displays of military marksmanship in American history. This is War Blunders. To understand this disaster, we need to understand what a target drone was in 1956. The F-6F Hellcat had been one of the Navy's primary fighter aircraft during World War II. By the 1950s, the Hellcats were obsolete as combat aircraft, but they were perfect for conversion into target drones. These drones were radio-controlled aircraft used for gunnery practice. Pilots would practice tracking and shooting at them. Sometimes they'd actually be shot down. That was the point. Other times they'd return and land under remote control. The drones weren't supposed to be sophisticated. They were essentially remote-controlled planes with basic flight controls. Simple, reliable, expendable. On August 16, 1956, the Navy was conducting training exercises at Point Mugu Naval Air Station, located on the coast northwest of Los Angeles. A Hellcat drone took off under radio control and flew out over the Pacific Ocean. Fighter pilots from the California Air National Guard's 196th Fighter Interceptor Squadron were practicing interception techniques. The exercise was routine. Track the drone, lock on, follow proper procedures. Sometimes they'd fire, practice rounds, sometimes not. At approximately 11 a.m., something went wrong with the drone's radio control system. The exact cause was never definitively determined. Equipment malfunction, radio interference, electronic failure. Whatever the cause, the ground controllers suddenly lost contact with the drone. The drone stopped responding to commands. It was now flying on its own, following whatever the last input had been before the failure. And that last input apparently included a turn to the east, toward land, toward Los Angeles. This was a problem, a serious problem. The drone had approximately 200 gallons of fuel. At cruising speed, that meant it could fly for 2-3 hours. Los Angeles was less than an hour away. An out-of-control aircraft heading toward a major metropolitan area, even an unmanned one, was an emergency. If it crashed into downtown Los Angeles, it could kill dozens of people, hit an apartment building, a school, a hospital. The Navy immediately notified military authorities. The situation escalated quickly up the chain of command. The order came down: shoot it down, now, before it reaches populated areas. The California Air National Guard's 196th Fighter Interceptor Squadron was already in the air. Two F-89 Scorpion interceptors were conducting the training exercise with the drone. F-89 Scorpions were all-weather interceptors designed to shoot down Soviet bombers during the Cold War. They were heavily armed with 104 Mighty Mouse 2.75-inch folding fin aerial rockets, 52 rockets in each wingtip pod. These weren't small weapons. Each rocket was 2.75 inches in diameter, about 4 feet long, and carried a 4.5-pound high-explosive warhead. They were designed to destroy bombers. Shooting down one obsolete unmanned target drone should be trivially easy. Point. Fire. Done. First Lieutenant Hans Einstein, nephew of Albert Einstein, and his radar operator were in one F-89. They locked onto the drone and moved into attack. Position. The drone was flying at approximately 16,000 feet, heading east toward the mountains separating the coast from the interior valleys. Einstein closed to firing range. His radar operator confirmed lock. He fired a salvo of Mighty Mouse rockets. They missed. Not just one or two rockets, the entire salvo. Multiple rockets, all missing the target. Einstein repositioned and fired again. Another salvo, another miss. The drone continued flying, apparently unaware that it was under attack. A second F-89 joined the chase. More rockets fired. More misses. By now, the drone had crossed the coast and was over land, heading toward the populated areas of Southern California. The Air Force scrambled more interceptors. More F-89s took off from Oxnard Air Force Base. The mission was clear: stop that drone before it kills someone. But there was a problem that was becoming increasingly obvious. The pilots couldn't hit it. The drone was smaller than the bombers the F-89s were designed to shoot down. It was maneuvering unpredictably, not because of evasive action, but because whatever malfunction had made it go rogue was also making it fly erratically. And the Mighty Mouse rockets, despite their impressive name, weren't precision weapons. They were unguided. Point in the right direction, fire, hope they hit something in the general area. Against a large bomber formation, you'd fire dozens of rockets and saturate the area. Some would hit. Against a single small target? Much harder. But the pilots kept trying. They had to. That drone was now over inhabited areas. By 11:30 a.m., the Runaway drone had flown over the Santa Susana Mountains and was approaching the communities of the San Fernando Valley. Below were neighborhoods, schools, shopping centers, thousands of people going about their daily lives, completely unaware that a robot aircraft was flying overhead with fighter jets in pursuit. The F-89 Scorpions continued their attacks. Rocket after rocket streamed toward the drone, and rocket after rocket missed. Here's where it gets worse. The Mighty Mouse rockets didn't just disappear when they missed. They had to come down somewhere, and somewhere was the town of Palmdale and surrounding communities. Residents looked up to see fighter jets screaming overhead, firing rockets. They saw the rockets miss their target, and then they saw those same rockets falling back to Earth. Some rockets still had live warheads. When they hit the ground, they exploded. One rocket crashed through the roof of a house. Another embedded itself in a garage, failing to explode but leaving a massive hole. Another hit a car, a Chevrolet, and buried itself in the vehicle. The car's owner would later pose for newspapers next to his rocket-damaged car. One woman, Mrs. Gertrude Gage, was in her backyard when she heard the fighter jets overhead. She looked up just as a spent rocket fell near her. The rocket's impact and resulting small fire set her dress ablaze. She suffered minor burns. Several other people reported close calls with falling ordnance. One man reported a rocket landing just feet from where he stood. Another family reported their garage being destroyed by an explosion. The city of Palmdale was under attack, not from an enemy, from their own Air Force trying to shoot down a drone. Meanwhile, the drone kept flying. By noon, Multiple F-89 interceptors were pursuing it. They'd fired hundreds of rockets. The official count would later estimate over 200 Mighty Mouse rockets expended, possibly more. Not one had hit the drone. The Air Force tried different tactics, firing from different angles, from higher altitude, from lower altitude, from dead behind, from the side. Nothing worked. One pilot later reported that he'd gotten close enough to see the drone clearly. It was flying straight and level, not maneuvering defensively. It was a perfect target. He fired. He missed. The ideal drone's flight path took it over the Antelope Valley, past Palmdale, heading northeast toward the Mojave Desert. This was actually good news. It was heading away from heavily populated areas, but it was still flying, still a threat, still needed to be shot down. Around 12:30 p.m., the pilots tried something different. Some F-89s carried 20mm cannons in addition to rockets. Cannons were more accurate than unguided rockets. Several pilots made strafing runs on the drone, firing hundreds of rounds of 20mm cannon fire. The results were the same: misses. The official after-action reports would later provide explanations for why the hits were so difficult. The drone was at high altitude, 16,000, 18,000 feet, where the thinner air affected rocket trajectories. The drone was small, much smaller than the bomber targets the F-89s were designed to engage. The erratic control inputs from the malfunctioning radio system made the drone's flight path unpredictable. The pilots were firing at maximum effective range because they didn't want to get too close to the drone in case it exploded. All valid technical reasons, but they didn't change the fundamental fact. The U.S. Air Force was failing to shoot down a single unmanned target drone. News of the chase had reached local radio stations. Reporters were following the story. Citizens in Palmdale and surrounding areas were watching the aerial battle unfold above them. And as rockets continued to rain down on civilian areas, people started getting angry. This solution to the runaway drone problem was creating more damage than the drone itself. By 1 p.m., the drone had been flying east for over 2 hours. It had traveled approximately 100 miles from Point Mugu. It was now deep over the Mojave Desert. Fuel calculations suggested it should run out of gas soon. The question was, where would it crash? The Air Force kept firing. More rockets, more cannon rounds. They were determined to bring it down before it crashed on its own. Around 1:15 p.m., after 90 minutes of being shot at by multiple fighter jets, after being the target of over 1,000 rounds of various ordnance, after being chased across Southern California, the drone's engine sputtered. The fuel tanks were empty. The drone began to descend. It glided down toward the desert floor, making what was essentially a controlled crash landing in an unpopulated area of the Mojave Desert near Palmdale. The fighter pilots watched it come down. They'd finally defeated it by waiting for it to run out of fuel. The Air Force never hit it. Not once, not with hundreds of rockets, not with thousands of cannon rounds, not with multiple aircraft, not with experienced pilots. The drone had defeated them simply by existing. The immediate aftermath was a mix of relief and embarrassment. Relief because the drone hadn't crashed into a populated area and killed anyone. The worst-case scenario had been avoided. Embarrassment because the reason it hadn't killed anyone had nothing to do with the Air Force's efforts. The drone had simply run out of fuel over empty desert, and in the process of trying to shoot it down, the Air Force had rained rockets on civilian neighborhoods, damaged property, and injured people. The city of Palmdale documented the damage. Over a dozen buildings were hit by falling rockets or rocket fragments. Several cars were damaged or destroyed. Multiple families filed claims against the military for property damage. Mrs. Gertrude Gage, whose dress had caught fire, required medical treatment for burns. 2 other civilians suffered minor injuries from falling debris. One resident told reporters, I'd rather take my chances with the drone crashing than have the Air Force shooting at it over my house. The media had a field day. Newspaper headlines across the country mocked the Air Force. Angry mechanical bird defeats Air Force. Robot plane leads wild chase over Southland. Air Force fires 1,000 rounds, hits nothing. Runaway drone wins Battle of Palmdale. The Los Angeles Times ran a detailed account with photos of the damage in Palmdale. The rocket embedded in the Chevrolet became the iconic image of the incident, a perfect symbol of the Air Force's failure. Editorials questioned how the military could defend America from Soviet bombers if they couldn't hit a slow-moving, malfunctioning target drone. This was 1956, the height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union had bombers. They would soon have ICBMs. Air defense was critical to national security, and the Air Force had just demonstrated that they couldn't shoot down a single obsolete drone flying in a straight line. Congressional representatives from California demanded answers. How could this happen? Why couldn't experienced pilots hit their target? What did this say about American air defense capabilities? The Air Force launched an investigation. The official report, when it was released, tried to frame the incident in the best possible light. They emphasized the technical difficulties: high altitude, small target, unpredictable flight path, maximum range engagement. They noted that the Mighty Mouse rockets were designed for area saturation against bomber formations, not precision strikes against single small targets. They pointed out that the pilots had followed proper procedures and had done everything by the book, all of which was true, but it didn't change the fundamental embarrassment. The investigation also acknowledged the civilian damage and injuries. The Air Force paid out claims for property damage. They implemented new procedures for engaging rogue aircraft over populated areas. Future procedures would prioritize forcing such aircraft toward unpopulated areas rather than engaging them directly over cities. But the damage to the Air Force's reputation was done. The Battle of Palmdale became a lasting embarrassment. For the pilots involved, particularly Lieutenant Einstein, it was personally frustrating. He was a skilled pilot. He'd done everything right, but the combination of technical factors and bad luck had made hitting the drone nearly impossible. Einstein later noted that the entire incident highlighted problems with the weapon systems. The Mighty Mouse rockets were effective against large formations, but terrible for precision work. The incident accelerated development of guided air-to-air missiles, weapons that could actually track and hit small, maneuvering targets. Within a few years, the Air Force would deploy Sidewinder and Falcon guided missiles that revolutionized air combat. The Battle of Palmdale had shown that unguided rockets were obsolete. The Navy, meanwhile, implemented better safety procedures for target drone operations, improved radio control systems, better fail-safe mechanisms, protocols for what to do if a drone went rogue. The incident had exposed serious weaknesses in both offensive weapons and defensive procedures, and it had done so in the most public, embarrassing way possible. The Battle of Palmdale occupies a unique place in military history. It's not a conventional battle. There was no enemy, no opposing force, no strategic objective beyond shoot down that robot. But it revealed something important: that advanced military technology isn't a guarantee of success. That training for one type of engagement doesn't necessarily prepare you for a different type. The F-89 Scorpions and their pilots were excellent at what they were designed for, intercepting large Soviet bombers in formation. But faced with a single small target, all that capability was useless. From a technical standpoint, the incident accelerated several developments. Guided missiles replaced unguided rockets for air-to-air combat. By the 1960s, fighters were equipped with heat-seeking and radar-guided missiles that could track and hit targets autonomously. Radio control systems for drones improved dramatically. multiple redundant control channels, better fail-safe systems, automatic return-to-base programming if control was lost. Procedures for dealing with rogue aircraft over populated areas were completely revised. The priority became forcing them away from cities, not shooting them down regardless of location. The incident also raised uncomfortable questions about Cold War air defense. If Soviet bombers attacked, could the Air Force stop them? The pilots chasing the drone were among the best-trained interceptor pilots in the country, and they'd failed. To be fair, hitting an enemy bomber would be easier than hitting the small, erratically maneuvering drone. Enemy bombers were larger, flew more predictably, and appeared in formations that made area weapons like the Mighty Mouse effective. But still, the public saw Air Force can't hit target and drew worrying conclusions about national security. For the residents of Palmdale, the incident became a local legend, the town that was bombed by its own Air Force. The battle fought in their skies. Some families kept fragments of rockets that landed on their property as souvenirs. The man whose Chevrolet was hit by a rocket reportedly kept the car with the rocket still embedded in it for years as a conversation piece. The city of Palmdale occasionally references the incident in local history. It's become part of the town's identity, the place where the Air Force lost a battle to a robot. Today, the Battle of Palmdale is remembered as both cautionary tale and comedy. Cautionary because it exposed real weaknesses in military capabilities. Comedy because there's something inherently funny about an Air Force that can't shoot down a drone. In the age of modern drones, Predators, Reapers, Global Hawks, it's hard to imagine modern fighters having the same problem. Current air-to-air missiles are incredibly sophisticated. They can hit targets that are actively evading. A malfunctioning drone flying straight would be trivially easy to destroy. But in 1956, the technology wasn't there yet, and the Battle of Palmdale exposed that fact in spectacular fashion. The Battle of Palmdale lasted 90 minutes. Over 1,000 rounds of various ordnance were expended. Multiple aircraft participated. Hundreds of rockets rained down on California. And at the end of it all, the drone crashed on its own when it ran out of fuel. 0 hits. 0 successful engagements. 0 military success. The only casualties were civilian, property damage, minor injuries, and the Air Force's reputation. It's easy to laugh at the Air Force's failure, and people did. The media mocked them. The public questioned them. Congress investigated them. But the pilots weren't incompetent. The equipment wasn't completely inadequate. The procedures weren't entirely wrong. They were just facing a problem they weren't designed to solve, with tools that weren't suited for the task, under pressure to succeed before the drone crashed into someone's house. And sometimes, the combination of bad luck, technical limitations, and difficult circumstances means you fire 1,000 rounds and hit nothing. The Runaway drone won the Battle of Palmdale, not through superior tactics, not through advanced technology, not through any action of its own. It won simply by being small, erratic, and lucky, and by having enough fuel to outlast the Air Force's patience. That was the Battle of Palmdale, the day the U.S. Air Force went to war with a robot and lost, the 90-minute chase that became a national embarrassment, the proof that sometimes the target wins just by refusing to be hit.